Hi there, it's me Audrina Lane again, and this week it's chapter 45 from Where Did Your Heart Go? So sit back, relax and enjoy. Charlotte struggled to concentrate through her classes, and the hands on her watch refused to tick by fast enough. However, the bell rang, and after promising Julia she would see her in the hall, Charlie bolted out of class. She had left all her bags in her locker, so she unlocked it and pulled out her makeup bag and body spray for a quick touch-up. She didn't notice Craig approaching until he was directly behind her, too close for comfort. "Hi Charlie, you're looking hot today," he said, reaching out and running a hand casually down her arm. "Thanks, Craig," she replied, trying to shake him off, but his hand gripped her and pushed her against the lockers. "I should never have let you go," he murmured, danger lurking behind his deep voice. "With your tight top and shorts, teasing all us guys with your sexy body," he sneered, his eyes looking directly down to take in the hint of her breasts. "Just let me go, Craig. It's over. I have a new boyfriend," Charlie said, struggling under his tightening grasp. She could see the indents from his fingers marking her pale skin. "Well, I don't see him. Where is he, this fictional boyfriend of yours?" he said, bringing his face so close she could feel droplets of his spit hit her cheeks. "I'm right here," said a familiar deep voice, and Charlie saw Mitchell looming over Craig's shoulder. "I think you need to take your hands off my girlfriend right this minute. Otherwise I'll not be responsible for my actions." A look of shock passed over Craig's features as he turned to stare up into Mitchell's stormy face, his grip on Charlotte's arm slipping away. "Sorry, mate," he mumbled, sloping off away like the coward he was. Charlotte was still shaking as Mitchell pulled her tight against his chest, the smell of his leathers and aftershave awakening her senses as the shake of fear turned to desire. "Are you okay, baby?" Mitchell murmured, running his hands through her hair, looking down into her face. "Yes, that was good timing," Charlie replied, looking up into his beautiful eyes and licking her lips slightly. "You look good enough to eat," he whispered, his lips reaching down to capture hers in an endless kiss that allowed their tongues to explore. When they broke apart, Charlie was breathing heavily, and her white skin was a blush pink from the heat, the marks from Craig's touch having disappeared. "So what's the plan then?" he asked. "Oh, dance practice for about an hour and then we can go home," Charlie said. "Do you want to put your bags in my locker and we'll head to the hall?" "Sure, sounds good to me," Mitch said, shrugging out of his jacket and trousers to reveal his normal sweatpants and t-shirt. Walking down the college corridor, several girls did a double take when they saw Mitchell. Being tall and gorgeous, he was hard to miss. Charlotte couldn't stop smiling as she held his hand tight. There were some toilets opposite, so Charlie ducked into the ladies to get change, whilst Mitch leaned against the wall opposite and waited for her. Charlie didn't want to leave Mitch alone. She'd seen the way his eyes were swept down her body and back up when he rescued her. She could hardly wait until he was in her room later this evening, as it might stop the intense throbbing that was sweeping through all her nerve endings. Once in her leotard and leggings, she grabbed her bag and was once more in his presence. How on earth she was going to be able to concentrate through all 3 routines with Mitchell, she didn't know. Just before she pushed open the door to the hall, Mitch caught her arm and pulled her against him. "I just want to take you home," he said in a breathy voice. "Now." Just before she pushed open the door to the hall... Oh, Charlie nodded as they kissed for a final time before composing themselves and entering the hall. After warming up, the group went through their 2 dances to Umbrella and Skyfall. Mitchell noticed that they'd added some moves to both routines, which showed off even more of Charlotte's stunning moves. "Come on, Mitch, we need you," Charlotte's voice shook him out of his thoughts and he stepped onto the floor. The girls quickly talked him through their routine, and they started to dance. Mitch watched in awe as the haunting melody filled the room. One girl seemed to dance alone, telling the tragic story. He almost forgot his cue, but as he stood and then caught Charlie, moving her down to the floor, it felt so right. He was meant to dance with her. After 3 more attempts, they all felt satisfied and called it a day. After all, they'd be doing 2 hours tomorrow afternoon, with full dress rehearsal to check everything fitted with the routines. Mrs. Grantley shook Mitch's hand at the end and was about to say something when they heard a phone ring. "Oh, sorry, that's mine," Mitch apologised, reaching for his phone. Charlotte watched as he answered, and then a look of shock crossed his face, followed by a huge smile as he hung up. "So," Charlotte said. "We've been chosen," he said, picking her up and spinning her round until she felt dizzy. "You mean the dirty dancing routine?" Charlotte asked. When he set her down, all the girls who'd been about to leave turned round to see what the excitement was. "Yes," he said, planting a large kiss on her lips. Julia stood beside them and implored, "Oh, tell us." "We did it. We've been chosen to dance in the interval before the judge's decision," Charlotte exclaimed, reaching over to grab Julia's hand in hers. "Fantastic news," Mrs. Grantley said, coming over to congratulate them. "Any chance we could see the routine tomorrow at practice?" "Sure," Mitch grinned. "We could do with a couple of practice runs before next weekend." "Well, the hall will be open from 11 tomorrow and main practice starts at noon. So see you all then," Mrs. Grantley said. Everyone started to gather their bags and head home. They were alone at the lockers, and before she had a chance to turn the key, Mitchell pushed her up against them. His hand swept down over her curves and pushed her even tighter into his body. "I love watching you dance," he said softly. "I love watching you dance, but I prefer it when we dance together," Charlotte said. Looking up into his eyes, she watched his lips head down and capture hers, softly at first and then with a fierceness that shook her to the core. She was glad of the solidity of the lockers behind her back as her legs turned to jelly from the feelings flowing through her body. In the car park, a few of the girls from the dance group were still there talking, and almost didn't recognise Charlotte as she strolled past them and jumped up on the bike behind Mitchell. She waved as they sped off down the road, and then she enjoyed the short drive home, her arms tightly around Mitchell's firm body. At home, the first thing that was noticeable was the lovely carnations on the hallway table. "Mum, we're home." "Oh, hi Charlie, hi Mitchell. Cold drink?" "Oh, yes please." "We'll go and get out of our leathers," Charlie said, heading for the stairs, "and maybe have a quick shower too?" "OK, I thought we could have takeaway for tea, so I can order when you're both ready," Steph said, her voice joyful, her nose in the air, smelling the scent of the flowers. Upstairs, Charlie noticed there were more carnations in a small vase on her dressing table. Her mother must have splurged on her flower purchasing to have enough for her room too. Once they were alone, Charlie simply lay down on her bed and stuck her legs out. "Help," she said, smiling up at Mitch as he approached the bed and swiftly pulled the leathers off. Charlie sat up and unzipped the jacket, flinging it over the end as Mitchell shrugged his jacket off. She sat up on the bed and unzipped his leather trousers, working them down to the floor so that he could step out of them. "Do you need a hand with any of your other clothes?" Mitch breathed, his fingers touching the strap of her leotard. Charlie nodded at just the barest touch of his fingers on her hot skin made it impossible to think, let alone talk. She stirred as the straps fell down her arms and Mitch bent down to pull the whole thing off at her feet. He ran his hands back up her legs to the waistband of her leggings and then pulled them down as she stood before him, clad only in her white bra and barely their panties. Her hands rested on his shoulder and she could feel him shaking slightly as his eyes drank her in. His hands once more ran up across her smooth skin of her legs and hips before wrapping around her to pull her close, so that he could reach her lips with his. She trembled in his arms as she kissed him back, and time ticked by slowly as they rediscovered each other. Before they went too far, she pulled back. "Definitely need a cold shower now." "Don't be too long," he murmured as she grabbed her dressing gown and left. Under the water, Charlie started to breathe normally and thought about the way she felt when he held her, when he danced with her. It was like they were two halves of the same person. She couldn't wait for later and also for tomorrow, and the chance to fly above his head again. Back in her room, she passed a clean towel to Mitch and he headed out. She watched the muscles of his back and his cute tight ass as he left the room. He was too gorgeous for words, and she still couldn't quite believe how lucky they had been to find each other. She pulled a fresh set of knickers on but no bra and just flung her long black sundress on before drying her hair. She was still applying lip gloss when he walked back in, the towel slung around his hips so she could stare at his chest and the small line of hair that ran down from his belly button to beneath the towel. "You look so sexy," Charlie said, her voice husky. She walked over and grabbed his towel, pulling it away from his body. She sneaked a look lower and felt a blush creeping over her skin as she averted his gaze. "It's all yours," he said, catching her hands in his and placing them on his hips. His finger moved to her chin and he brought his mouth down to hers again before they broke apart and he pulled on jeans and a t-shirt. She noticed he didn't put any underwear on at all. "You tease," she said softly. "I'll be thinking of you naked all evening now." "I think of you naked all the time. Well, except when we're dancing. If I did that I'd forget all the steps because you're so distracting. Now let's head down. I'm starving and need a drink." I heard them come through the door, giggling, and I walked through from the patio, where I'd been enjoying the sun and thinking once again about my mystery man. Earlier I got to work to discover that an amazing proportion of our radio listeners wanted me to meet my secret admirer at Rock on the River, and ticket sales to the event had almost doubled in the hours following the announcement. I told Paul and Ian about the delivery of flowers, and both said they'd not given out my home address. I dropped Jack a text and he said exactly the same thing, so I still had no idea who my mystery man was. "Nice flowers, Mum," Charlie said, handing Mitch a beer from the fridge and then pouring herself a glass of Pimm's, ready mixed. "Yes, they were delivered today," I replied, and then quickly changed the subject. "So, what would you like to eat tonight?" "Oh, pizza," Charlie replied, and Mitch agreed. "Shall we sit in the garden as it's nice?" I asked, and they both followed me out. "So how is practice?" "Great, Mum. We're going in for more tomorrow," Charlie said, "and we will be dancing in the interval before the judge's decision." "Congratulations." "Yeah, it's fantastic. I can't wait to dance with Charlotte again," he said, exchanging a look with her that was hotter than the evening sun. I heard the doorbell, so I went inside to sort out the food. Glancing out of the window, I noticed Charlie had turned on the music system, and she was swaying to the sounds that filled the garden with happiness. Mitchell never took his eyes off her. I picked up the card that came with the flowers, but there was no clue in the writing as to who he was, my mystery man. But I'd be finding out in a few weeks. I was about to drift off into my thoughts when Mitchell walked in. "Can I give you a hand?" "Thanks, Mitchell," I replied, handing him some plates of pizza, wedges and coleslaw. "Would you like another beer?" I asked. "Yes, don't worry, I'll help myself," he said, helping to lay out the food and then disappearing back into the kitchen. We spent a pleasant evening chatting as the sun went down, and as I cleared up I left them alone in the moonlight. The music was still on low as I loaded the dishwasher. I realised it was Careless Whisper by George Michael. I paused and closed my eyes, remembering a time when I was young and dancing with the one I loved under a moonlit sky. Mitch stood up and held out his hand to Charlie, and as they moved across the grass it felt as though I was staring into a mirror that was reflecting back a scene from my memories. A single tear bounced on my cheek for a split second and then fell onto the worktop. "I'm going to bed now," I called from the doorway. "I'm filling in for Paul on the breakfast show, so if I don't see you in the morning I'll catch you later." "OK, Mum, night," Charlie managed over the music. "Night, Stephanie," Mitchell replied, turning towards me and raising his hand slightly. I could hardly breathe as the gesture and the way he looked in the moonlight reminded me distinctly of James, who seemed to have returned from my dreams into a new reality with my lovely daughter. I sighed and turned towards the stairs, the scent of flowers filling the hallway. I lay in bed with the window slightly open, and I could still hear the faint sound of music coming from the garden. Then as sleep claimed me, I dreamed about my mystery man. In my dreams, he looked a lot like James. So that's it for today, and don't forget, if you want to read ahead, you can buy my books in any format, ebook or paperback, on Amazon. And I'll see you again next week.